So good evening, guys. Welcome to the GU Weekly Talk. So today my topic is going to be cryptography and basic cybersecurity. So you guys might be wondering, like, what are these two? What are these two have in common? Like, how come these two are connected? Right? So, like, you guys like to give any answers there, like, in connection? Basically, when it comes to cyberspace, it's usually a way to share information. Very basic. It's a way to connect with each other, right? Connect with each other and to share your data, share information. Right? Cryptography plays a part in securing that. Right? So cryptography is basically maybe other definition of it. But cryptography plays a part of securing that. But and we know that there's a lot of effort and research being put into how to make it secure, how to make it hack-proof and all these. But at the same time, every day, almost daily, you get that a lot of machines have been hacked, devices have been hacked, information leaked, emails have been leaked, and a lot of these things are going on, right? So no matter how secure you seem to be, there's always some way of losing the security, and you end up sharing your information with people whom you don't intend to share this information. Right? Often it's very embarrassing, and often it's life-threatening. Right? So let's take a look at what cryptography is. So basically, cryptography is about constructing and analyzing protocols that prevent third parties from gaining access to your information. Right? So cryptography is kind of this whole area of coming up with protocols, coming up with encryption, methods of encryption, and all these things are included in cryptography. So, but those days, in the previous time, in the early days, cryptography was usually encryption itself. So, when you talk about cryptography, it was just basically encryption. But today we come one step above that, and we also talk about all these protocols of how to make it safe and all these things. Right, so but today I'm not going to talk much about the cryptography part of it, but more towards encryption. So when it comes to encryption, I think some few weeks back, I think Lahiru did a presentation or a lightning talk on I think ciphers, right? See the ciphers and all that. So that was kind of the very basic introduction into encryption. So basically, encryption is changing a set of data or changing the form of the data, right? So you have one letter and you change it to something else. But you do this based on certain rules, based on some way, so that you are also able to reverse that process to get the original form of whatever you encrypted, right? So this is important. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense, right? What's the point of encrypting something in a way that you can't even get it back? There's no point doing that, right? So basically, encryption can be categorized into two broad areas. Like first one is symmetric key or private key encryption, and the other one is public key encryption. So let's just have a brief idea about what these two are. So when it comes to the symmetric encryption, again, this can be broken into two categories. One is stream ciphers and one is block ciphers. So stream ciphers work in a way that each and every letter is being encrypted. So each letter, or rather each byte, is being changed according to some rules, certain rules, right? In the case of block ciphers, you take a block of letters or a block of characters in such a way that each block is the same size, and then encrypt the whole block, right? So for this, you also use things like padding. By the look of it, it might seem that block ciphers are more secure than stream ciphers, but actually, if you use them properly, if you use stream ciphers also, it's designed properly, it's used in the correct manner, both are equally secure, right? So I just given some examples of what the stream ciphers are and what block ciphers are. Some of them are frequently used. So, and also I just given some very small comparison of the two. So usually when it comes to stream ciphers, it's very fast because it just deals with single bytes, not with blocks. When it comes to block ciphers, because it deals with blocks, the process is a bit slower. So that is the main difference. And also because generally we tend to kind of use, or we make mistakes in our design. I mean, that's kind of the human nature, right? Because of that, sometimes stream ciphers seem to be seems to be a bit less secure, not due to the fact that there is any problem with the algorithm itself, but the way we use it, or the way, it's human error comes to that, right? So throughout the presentation, we will see this common quality of human, or common aspect of human error that actually leads us in trouble, right? So let's move on. So this is basically a small graphical representation of how encryption happens. So in this case, a single key is used to encrypt a message and to decrypt it, right? So it's like this. It's like, in I think grade 6 or 7 we studied algebra, right? The basic algebra. So it's you have some unknown character and you do some computation on it and you get an answer. So how do you get back to your original or the missing value or the unknown value? You just reverse the process, right? So it's something like this. So you have a certain algorithm which will change the value of whatever you are inserting, and it will you can get something at the end. So this algorithm is known, right? But a certain hidden value is there. A certain, you call it this key basically. So this key is unknown. It's private, right? So otherwise, like anyone or most of everyone will know how this algorithm works. You know the exact steps of how something is being encrypted. But the only missing thing here is the secret key. So the secret key is just known to the sender and the recipient. So the same key is being used, so nothing much complicated there. Alright? So this also, as long as you keep this key secure, you can get some good security with it. But in this, before you start this process, you need to share the key in some other process. You can't, either you should go and physically give the key, or you have to find out some other secure mechanism to share this key, right? So that is basically private key or symmetric key encryption. And other one is public key encryption. So when I first learned about public key encryption, I was a bit, it was like an insult to your intelligence, right? Basically, what it says is that the algorithm that is used to encrypt is known, right? And the key that is used to encrypt is also known. But it says you can never decrypt it without the private key. Right? It doesn't sound right? I mean, you do some. So example, this is the grade 7 algebra kind of thing. You know the equation, and you also know the secret value, but you can never reverse it. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it kind of like insults your intelligence, right? I mean, this is what I felt while learning about it. But due to the way this algorithm is constructed, due to some certain factors, you end up being difficult to reverse it. Right? It's very difficult to reverse it, and we'll see why it actually is. So basically, public key encryptions are used in two ways. One way is to as a means of authentication, and the other way is to share information secretly to a specific person, right? So in the case of authentication, like we use it on a daily basis. We have RSA application in our device, and in order to log in to our DoD, we use that RSA key. So it makes sure that it is me who is logging into this system or logging into this computer. So that's one idea of it. Because in this case, I use my private key in order to solve some trick or some problem or some algorithm which will match the public key. So since I have used my private key, we can make sure that it is actually me who is signing in, right? So that's one function of it. And the other way is to just encrypt whatever the message is. So if you want to share some message secretly with someone else, you use that person's public key to encrypt it, and only that person will be able to decrypt it. So you can't use this public key to decrypt it. So that is kind of the challenge here. So if you look at it, you have examples like Diffie-Hellman key exchange, RSA, or digital signature standard. So these are encryption, public key encryption that is being used currently. And one of the most famous and the first public key encryption is RSA. So I thought we'd just look at it in a little bit more detail. All right. So before that, just to give you an idea about how this works, so you can see that this message is being encrypted by, so this is the recipient. So this message is being encrypted by Bob's public key, right? And this is the, you call it the ciphertext. You have it. To decrypt it, you need to use the private key. So you can't use the public key to decrypt it. So it's something like this. Say for example, now you send a letter. You want to send a letter to someone or a parcel to someone, and you need to make sure that only that person can open it, right? One way of doing it is you get a box or something, put whatever the stuff you need to send, close it, take a padlock and lock it, right? And you have the key to lock this. So there are some padlocks which you need a key also to lock it, right? It doesn't work without the key, right? So use this. You use your key to lock the padlock. But of course, you can also always open the padlock with the same key, right? So when you send this package over to the person, your recipient, that person will also have a copy of the same key, and then you can that person can use the same key to unlock it. Now imagine that there is a kind of padlock with two keyholes, right? One to lock it and one to unlock it. So you can just use, in order to lock it, you need to use one key. To make sure that to operate the unlocking mechanism, you need to use another key, right? So this is how a padlock might work. I mean, you can come up with padlocks like that, right? So if you have a padlock like this, you give one key to everyone. It's called the public key, right? Anyone can use this key to lock the padlock. But there's the other key, you just have one copy of it. It's called the private key, right? You have it with yourself. So if a certain padlock is locked, you're the only person who can unlock it. So it kind of works like that, right? It's kind of an analogy to try to understand what actually happens behind a public key, private key encryption. So moving on, so just RSA, right? So RSA is first published in 1978 by these three guys. So that's how the RSA name comes. But the thing we have to notice that a similar system was created by someone called Clifford Cox in 1973. He was working for the British intelligence. So it was a similar system, but he didn't get the credit for creating or coming up with some solution like this, because it was classified information. So it was only declassified in 1997, right? But it was a similar system. And we also need to note that another interesting point, which is not relevant to the topic, but there is something that we can kind of note throughout history, actually. So if you see in 1973 and 1970, it's not a big gap, right? So it was kind of the same thing. It came about in the same time period, right? It was not just one single individual. So usually something that we can note throughout history is that when someone gets a bright idea, it's not the only person who gets that idea. Usually there are at least 2 or 3 other people. But the person who wins is the one who goes to market first. So if you take the light bulb, if you take the telephone, the same thing. You see a lot of controversy going on behind this about patents, and if you just read up on it, you'll get to know about these. So that's something I like to note. And the other thing is, so this is one of the first practical public key crypto systems. And then we have P, Q, N, E, and D. So what are these letters? So these are the values that have been used in this algorithm. So I'll just give you a brief description of what these letters are and how and why this algorithm is complex to reverse without knowing the keys. So P and Q are 2 prime numbers, just that, right? So N is the product of these 2 prime numbers, okay? And this function N, or psi N, is the number of relative primes of N. So, do you guys know what are relative primes? Anyone have any idea about what is a relative prime? So, if I say the number of, so actually what this function does is that it gives the number of relative primes that n has, right? So, for example, if I take two prime numbers, say 3 and 2, right? So, 3 times 2 is 6, okay? The relative prime, the relative prime numbers that 6 has will be given by 2 times 1, that is 2. So 2, because 3 minus 1 is 2 and 2 minus 1 is 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. So 6 has 2 relative prime numbers. So what is a relative prime? So a relative prime is a prime number or a number, or common factor. So for example, now if you start factorizing the number 8, right? If you start factorizing number 8, you get 1, 2, 4 and 8, right? But in this case, 4 and 8, sorry, 2 and 4 share factors with 8, because 2 itself is a factor of 8, so it's not a relative prime, right? 4 also shares a factor with 8, so that's also not a relative prime. So in this case, 1 is the only relative prime to 8, right? This is a simple example to know what relative primes are. So if I take two, maybe a better example would be if I take two relative prime number or two prime numbers like 3 and 5. Okay, take these two prime numbers and you get a product of 15. So in order to calculate the number of relative primes 15 has, you need to do p minus 1 q minus 1, that is 2 times 4, 8. So 15 has 8 relative prime numbers. So the first one is 2, right? 2 doesn't share any common factors with 15. But you can't take 3. Though 3 is a factor of 15, you can't take 3. Why is that? Because 15 and 3 are factor. I mean, 3 is a factor of 15, so you can't take 3. You can take 4. Right? So basically the numbers that you have up till 15, right? So so this is the way to obtain the relative prime numbers. And then E actually forms part of the public key. E is a number such that it is less than the number of relative prime numbers and more than 1. So E is you can pick any number like that. And D is such that you have to solve this equation that E times D modulus this number of relative primes gives 1. So that is the equation you have to solve. So to do this, there is actually an algorithm called Euclidean algorithm, which it's not complex, but you can use it to actually get this. You can actually even take a paper and get a lot of resources or videos explaining how this works. So that's how you get D. So D forms part of the private key. So when it comes to the public key, you use the product of these two prime numbers and E, and when it comes to the private key, you use the product of these prime numbers and D. And even though you know N, even though you might know N, there is no way that you can know D, right? Because in order to know D, you should be able to factor N, or rather you should be able to get what these two prime numbers are. So you just know the product. But this is the problem, or this is the difficulty of reversing the RSA algorithm, right? So if you are able to factor N into these two prime numbers, you will be able to crack it. But see, if we obviously use numbers like 3 and 5 or 17 and 13, obviously you will be able to crack it. Usually the number of digits one prime number contains is about 150 or 300. So 300 digits, right? So if you actually do the math, and if you use a brute force if you use brute force to factorize this, you would end up taking about 64 or 70 or hundreds of years trying to factorize it. So it's not practical to do it, right? So this way it's quite widely used and it's quite secure also. But at the same time, I would also like to mention that when it comes to quantum computing, the thing changes a bit. There is something called the Shaw's algorithm. If you use that, but you you need quantum computers to use it. So if someday you kind of build up a practical quantum computer, which of course it should be cost effective as well, then of course RSA can be easily broken. But since there are no quantum computers right now, I think it will be a bit safe. But I think even after that, probably we come up with something which is even secure with quantum computers. This has always been the case. Someone finds a way to encrypt something, and someone finds a way of breaking it. It kind of goes on and on, never stops, right? So that is kind of the difficulty of RSA, and so I thought I should share that as well. So how do you encrypt it? So M is the message or the plain text. So what you do is you raise it to the power of E and get the modulus by N, right? So that's how we encrypt it, and you can't decrypt this, right? How do you decrypt it? You use D, the value of D. So this is how the RSA encryption and decryption works. And in the previous slide, I showed you how to generate these keys. So it's not much complex, but RSA, when you actually use it in a practical way, like with huge numbers like 300 digits or 150 digits, right? It takes a lot of computational power. It's the process of encryption and decryption is very slow. So usually, how you use it is that you don't use RSA or a public key crypto system to encrypt the message. You rather use it to encrypt the key. So what you do is you take the message, encrypt it using a symmetric key algorithm, which which I showed earlier, something like AES or something like that, and then use this RSA to exchange the key. Right? If you want to send the key to someone, you use RSA, so that person can decrypt all the keys and use that to decrypt the message. So this is how it's practically being used. No, not E and D. You need also N, the product. So what you do is you convert the message into some numeric form, get the ASCII value or something like that. But usually you don't just get the ASCII value, you get the ASCII value, use some of your own, maybe change the value here and there, and then raise it to the power of E and get the modulus of N, like the remainder when you divide it by N. So N is the product here of P and Q. Okay, N is the product. So you can't easily reverse this. Right? Even Diffie-Hellman also works in a similar way, but instead of prime numbers, they use logarithms. So that's also a similar way, but it's based on different things. So it's like it's easy to do multiplication, but it's kind of hard to do division, right? Because you need to think like how many times this is this, something like that. But it's maybe not the perfect analogy, but it's something like that. So okay, the Imitation Game. So most of you all might have seen the movie The Imitation Game, right? And so this actually, this is one of the wonderful piece of engineering, right? You can use the same machine to encrypt and decrypt, no problem. Right? You just need to get the key settings and the settings of the rotor wheel. And you can use the same machine you just need to type in whatever message you need to encrypt, and you get the typed message. And if you retype it, you get the decrypted message with the same key settings, right? So this was used very successfully by the Germans, and no amount of time was able to crack the code. But Alan Turing was able to actually crack the code, not because of a bad design or not because a flaw in the machine itself, but due to two very two fundamental mistakes which resulted because of our weakness, right? Because we sometimes tend to take things for granted, right? So what are these two flaws, right? One feature of this machine is that it will never encrypt a certain key to itself. So for example, if you take the letter A and if you encrypt it, it will never encrypt it to A. First time if you press A, it will go to B or C, keep on changing, but it will come back to A itself. And the other thing was sending a weather report, right? So what these guys did was, so every day at 12 o'clock or 12 midnight, the key will change. The key used in the Enigma machine will change. So the codes keep on changing, right? But every morning at 6 a.m., they send a weather report. It said weather report, and whatever the weather, they send it out. So this was kind of a routine thing that the Germans did, right? So these two are the key points of breaking the code. So here, if you look at it, when you go about, when you really think about it, right? It might look like a stroke of genius to make sure that a letter is not encrypted to itself, right? So that if there are double letters, you can't identify it. For example, if you write some name which has two letters in it, right? Attribute or something like that. So it's ATT, right? So if you encrypt it, if the two T's encrypt to the same letter, you might be able to find some pattern, right? So to avoid that, they made sure that you can't encrypt the same letter to itself, right? But this is being kind of like too careful with it, right? So see, one important thing that we need to know is that if you want to hide something, right? If you want to kind of keep something secret, the worst thing that you can do is actually physically hide it, because that's going to make sure that all the others' attention is drawn there. Something was there before, and now it's suddenly missing, right? So even in this case, when you try to do, it's kind of like over-engineer, right? You go thought it. You have to always make sure that everything looks natural. If you play something, if you make sure that nothing will happen. See, letters, any message can have two letters, right? Any message can have two letters. But if you specifically make sure that even if there are two letters, that the encrypted message doesn't have letters, it's kind of making sure that this doesn't happen. It's a clue. You're giving that person a clue, right? You're going out of the way. So another example that I can mention when it comes to keeping things natural. Recently, I won't say the name, but a big financial institution ran into a lot of fines due to some fraud, insider trading. You might have heard. The fine was about in billions of dollars. I think last year or something, right? So can you guys guess like how they detected this? How was this uncovered? So this was grade 8 probability theory, right? Grade 8 probability theory. So when you toss a coin, right? What's the probability of getting heads or tails? You do about 100 times, it's half, right? One time you get heads, one time you get tails, right? In the same way with life as well. You're not going to always win. When it comes to deals, you might do better deals or bad deals, but you're not going to always win, right? You're not going to always win. If you're always winning, that means you're doing something out of the ordinary. So this is how they discovered it. So each time this particular institution bid, they won, right? Each time they won. So so usually you can maybe half the time you lose, half the time you win. Even if you're so good, there should be a percentage of failure, right? There should be a percentage of failure. If you try to do it too much, if you forget this, you actually tend to forget these things. You don't think about the importance of keeping it natural, right? So this is how they schemed it and they were protective of everything. But the way they discovered was a very simple mistake. A very simple mistake. It was not that the information leaked out or anything. It was not that employees went and complained and whistleblowing and all this. It was a very simple thing of trying to go against the law of nature, basically, right? So any person analyzing this wouldn't have to do any complex analysis on data mining and all this to come to this conclusion. It is very obvious. If someone is always winning, then there is obviously something wrong going on here. So ultimately they discovered that it was because of insider trading and got fined. So, and also there's an interesting video of how the Enigma machine was broken. So I think since it's interesting and relevant to the topic, I thought we should look at it. So this is from Numberphil YouTube channel. So just look at this.
So in our first Enigma video, we left you on a bit of a cliffhanger. I was just about to show. So in our first Enigma video, we left you on a bit of a cliffhanger. I was just about to show you the flaw in the Enigma machine. Now that video was only meant to be a short follow-up video. But when we saw the reaction to our first Enigma video, we decided to come in and film again to show you how that flaw worked and how they broke the Enigma code. Now, if you want to see the original Enigma video, it shows you how the Enigma machine worked. Go check that out. We'll put the links in the description. But now let's have a look at that flaw. So, here's the Enigma machine again. Now, if I press the letter K, there we go, the letter Q lights up this time. Now if I keep pressing the letter K, a different letter lights up each time. So a double letter would not be a double letter in the code. So it's a very good code indeed. But it is never K itself. So this was the flaw. A letter never becomes itself. So A is not A, B is not B, and so on. Z is not Z. This is a clue. So the way you break the Enigma code is if you imagine you have an Enigma message, you try and guess a word or a phrase that might appear in that message. Now, every morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, the Germans would send a weather report. Now, that was a standard form. That was always the same every day, apart from the actual weather. It was always a standard format. So we can pick a word that's going to be in that weather report. We might pick the word or phrase weather report or Wetterbericht in German. And I apologise now if I've translated that badly. Mein Deutsch ist sehr schlecht. Entschuldigung. Now, I'm going to write Wetterbericht on a piece of paper.
That's weather report.
That's weather report there in German. Here, I've got an Enigma code. And I'm going to slide my guess underneath the code. And I'm going to try and find where this phrase fits in the message. Now, I know a letter can't become itself. So it can't fit here because I have a T becoming T. So that's not where it fits. Let's try this. Can it fit here? No, I've got this T matching with T again. Let's try here. Now, I've got no matching. From what I can see, no matching letters there, so it might fit there. If I try that, see, look, those R's match up, so it can't fit there. So maybe it's here. Maybe this is the phrase weather report. Now, from this point, we can start breaking the Enigma code. So you could use different phrases. Try and imagine what a German officer would send in World War II. So, for example, messages would end with Heil Hitler. So is it Heil Hitler at the end of the message? Now, if it is, we shouldn't have any letters matching with Heil Hitler. H's, E's, I's, L's. What the British codebreaker Alan Turing had to do was find a way to use this flaw to break Enigma messages. So he built a huge machine called the bomb machine. It was designed by Alan Turing and another codebreaker called Gordon Welchman. It was a big machine, noisy thing, it would rattle around, and this could help you break the code in under 20 minutes. So you would have to break the code every morning. So every morning the settings for the Enigma machine would change. So all the Enigma machines would change stroke of midnight. So that's why a machine that could break the code that quickly was so important. So the bomb machine tried to work out the plug board at the front of the Enigma machine. If we go back, at the front of the Enigma machine, we have this thing called the plug board that connects letters into pairs. You actually make 10 pairs of letters. When I press a letter, the signal first goes through the plug board. It then goes through the first rotor, through the second rotor, through the third rotor, it then loops back, then it goes through the machine again in reverse order. So then it goes through the third rotor, the second rotor, the first rotor, and finally it goes through the plug board one more time and it lights up one of these bulbs. Now I'm going to try and draw that for you, but I'm going to make it as simple as I can. Let's try and do that. So first of all it goes through the plug board, then it goes through all the rotors and I'm going to call that just one big magic box called R for rotors. And the last thing it does is it goes through the plug board. If we look at our weather report here, let's look in the second place. T becomes E. Let me do that. If I press T, it goes through the plug board, through all the rotors, through the plug board again, and out comes E. Now we're going to use this to work out the plug board. I'm going to make one guess. I'm going to guess T is connected to A on the plug board. That's a guess, but I'm going to use it. So let's say that means that T goes through the plug board and out comes A. Now A goes through the rotors. Now we know how the rotors are wired up. So we know that, we pick a position and find out what happens to A. That's not hard to do. And I don't know, let's make something up. Let's say it comes out as P. But if I do that, I can deduce that P goes through the plug board and becomes E, which means I can deduce that P is connected to E on the plug board. Now that's pretty cool. So you've worked out one of the plug board settings. If that diagram works, P must be connected to E. So I've done this a few more times, doing the same method using my weather report crib, and I've discovered a few more plug board settings. So the first one we discovered was PE. Now I've discovered K and Q are connected on the plug board. I've discovered X and B are connected on the plug board, and I've discovered T and G are connected on the plug board. But this last one is a problem. I've discovered that T and G are connected on the plug board, but I guessed that T and A were connected on the plug board, and it can't be both. This is called a contradiction. It can't be both TA and TG at the same time. This means my guess, the TA, was wrong. Throw it away, I got it wrong. Now I'm going to check the next one. What, TB? I might check TC, TD. I have to do all 26 options. TA, TB, TT, TZ. If all the 26 options are wrong, that means your rotor position is wrong. And what you do is you go click, you check the next rotor position, and you go through all that again. Now that would take a very long time. So Alan Turing came up with two ways to make this a bit quicker. The first one, a really clever idea. He noticed that once you found one mistake, like TA and TG, this means that all these other deductions are also wrong, and they don't need to be checked. So they're all fruit of a poison tree. They can all be rejected at the same time, and you don't need to check them again. So that really speeds it up. The other way to speed it up is you can do this instantaneously with electrical circuits. So that's what the bomb machine did. It had applied electrical current to my assumption, TA. The electrical current flows through the machine. It flows through TG, which means wrong. But it would also flow through all these other deductions, which means I can find all my deductions, which are all wrong, and I can do it instantaneously with electrical circuits. And then it will go click and check the next. And it could go through all the rotor positions in about 20 minutes. So the main thing to remember is the bomb machine is built a little bit backwards. It's a process of elimination. And so what you're left with is what wasn't wrong. And you would actually check that by hand and see if it works. The bomb machine was named in honor of a Polish code-breaking machine called Bomba. Bomba was a completely different machine, worked on a completely different principle. It wasn't a huge machine, you could sit it on your desk if you wanted to, and it exploited a flaw in the German procedures. Now they could use Bomba, the Polish could use Bomba to break Army and Air Force Enigma codes, but they couldn't break naval Enigma codes. So what Alan Turing had to do was find a way to break Army, Air Force and Navy Enigma codes. And it had to be a bit more robust, so that if the Germans choose to change their procedures, that this method would still work. What the Navy was doing differently is the rotor starting positions were actually sent at the beginning of each message, but they were sent in another code entirely. So it was a completely different code just to send the rotor starting positions. So you need to work out how that worked as well before you could even start breaking the naval code.
Is there anything that the makers of the Enigma machine could have done to have avoided this problem? Was there some simple thing that the Enigma makers could have put into that device there and it would have not have been broken like this?
Well, hindsight is a fabulous thing. You wanted to make it so that a letter could become itself. That was the flaw. And so the British saw Enigma. They said, that's a good idea. We'll have that. They nicked the idea. We saw Enigma and we decided to make one of our own. We called it the Type X machine, except we took out the flaw. So a letter could sometimes become itself. This made it a more secure machine. Now, from what I've heard, the Germans tried to break our code, but they concluded that it was better than the Enigma machine, so they gave up trying. At least that's what I've heard. It's very difficult to know for sure. It was all very secret.
So if you've watched our original video about how...
So that's about how the Enigma code is broken. So another thing I would like to mention is that looking back, I'll talk about making it look natural, right? Though they were able to break the codes and decode all the German messages which were encoded using the Enigma, the British never used everything, right? They never used everything. Because if you start, if the Germans knew that, whatever you send, or whatever coded message you send is being decrypted, then they are going to smell a rat. They are going to say, okay, there's something wrong here. So even when you have information that, okay, this thing is going to blow up or something, you have to just, go along with it. So that's, I think, a pretty, brave thing that they did also. I mean, they need to make sure that the most important things are saved, or it's used only for the most important things, and you don't let it out. So sometimes, just imagine the plight of these guys, right, who were able to actually read this message, or just imagine the plight of the person who decided which message to use and which to ignore, right? When that guy had to consciously say that, okay, it's okay that you guys die, but I want these guys alive. No boys like that. You need to make tough decisions at times. It's like that. So anyway, I know maybe that person got a nervous breakdown or something later on, but so that's that. Okay, moving on now. This comes to the next part of common cyber attacks. So why I talked about encryption is that, and also encryption and how tough it is, and maybe the flaws of it and all these things, is that today when we use the cyberspace, we kind of feel safe in a way. We have end-to-end encryption. We have our data is encrypted and secure and all that, right? But even with these encryptions, now if you look through the way encryption works, it's usually pretty solid, right? Except, the flaws, if you look at it, why those things didn't work at times was because of our mistakes, the way we used it. Those were the problems with it. But even with such, otherwise it's going to be secure. But even with such secure mechanisms, day in and day out, you have thousands and thousands of cyber attacks, right? So we'll just take a look at some of the common the most common cyber attacks. So I got this from a site which kind of listed the most common cyber attacks. So I have reversed the order. So among the most common, the least common in this list is the APT, right? Or it's advanced persistent attacks. So here what happens is the motive of the attacker is to steal information rather than damage the system. So if a person is able to infiltrate, so it's like a spy try to infiltrate and get information. So once an attacker infiltrates a system or infects a machine or machines in that network, that person tries to remain as silent as possible and to get much information, right? So how do you attack it? You use something called spear phishing. So when I talk about phishing, I'll explain what phishing is. But what they do is they somehow trick one of the employees in some organization or one of the persons who uses some machine in that network to install a Trojan, to install some application. So obviously that person should have admin rights and all that. But once that application is installed, the attacker has command over that particular machine. And since this is inside kind of an internal network, once you have access to one machine or one server, then you pretty much have access to most of the or the other servers as well, right? So this is how that person infiltrates, and this is actually these types of attacks are very difficult to detect because, I mean, when you look at the system, nothing wrong is there. I mean, nothing wrong is apparent, right? If the person hasn't actually damaged the system. The person is just there, lying there dormant and just observing stuff. And how can you detect an invisible person looking at you, right? It's like a person coming inside and wearing an invisibility cloak and he's just there. So how do you actually detect something like this? How can you identify that there is actually a person here watching us? So the way is like, so what happens is, so ultimately, if you want to do something useful with that information, you got to transfer it, right? You need to transfer that information, or whatever the information collected or whatever information you need to transfer. So the way you can do this is by monitoring the network. So this attacker doesn't know the exact workings of this network. That person doesn't know which server sends information to which server. Right? He doesn't know that person won't have the inner workings of it. Right? So what can happen is, if you detect some bulk information being copied from one place to another, which usually doesn't happen, right? If you can detect these kind of things, then you know that something's wrong is there. Then what you can do is immediately take it off the grid and then investigate and try to find the infected machine, right? So that is one type of attack. Another attack is social media threats. So usually now today when it comes to social media, you look at the news, you find a lot of people actually committing suicide because of that, right? So what happens is they either take some private information of you or trick you into installing something which gives them control over your information, right? And unfortunately, actually, we are the people who also give permission for this, right? I mean, some application asks some, we don't even actually go through what the application is actually asking permission for. We just say okay and install. If it's something, I mean, especially when it comes to people without much IT knowledge, right? If that app is or that Trojan is marketed in a very attractive way, then just simply install it, and you end up sharing all your information. So people use these kind of threats, use this information in order to blackmail you and threaten you to maybe reveal other information or gain access into your network, and can do a lot of things like that. So that's another common way. Another thing is unpatched software. So even recently, a lot of computers are infected with the ransomware. The main causes an unpatched software. So though the hackers were able to exploit something very technical in order to infiltrate a computer, ultimately what led to the machines being infected was that the software is not patched. Right? The Windows, the users hadn't installed the updates. So this is another common way with what these security analysts and hackers do is they try to break the system in some way. They use various techniques to infiltrate the system. They might usually these kind of in order to do this, you kind of need a very solid knowledge about the operating systems and how memory works and memory management and all this. But though the hack is a bit complicated, the prevention usually is not that complicated. You just need to update your PC, and then the hacker has to find some other way. And the other thing is that other thing hackers rely on is that once they find a flaw, they don't. They make sure that it's not known to anyone. But usually, what happens is, connecting to something which I said earlier, usually it's not this one person who gets this flaw. There's also another person who gets this flaw, but that person usually is a good person, and they report this bug and report this vulnerability, and then that's how a patch is created. So the first person to win is to the person who actually exploited this. If it was exploited by the hacker, then you had it. If it was exposed, then the time period. There's of course a time period before they can analyze the problem and come up with a bug fix or whatever. But the window is less. Right? The window in which you can exploit this in order to attack the system is less. right? So that is something else. And phishing. Phishing is you trick users into entering your login credentials. Now actually, I mean, even among us there are people who have done this, right? So I'm not going to say who it is, but there are people who have done this. Right? You just act. So it's Pulvara So what you need to do is you just trick the user into giving your credentials or login information or clicking something, and you get them to install it. Right? A lot of people are tricked by this. And in some instances, you can't even detect it. Usually, most phishing attacks, yes, you can detect it. But I'll actually show you an example, which I think happened this last week, which was discovered. I'll come to that. So, in that case, it was even difficult to identify that this is actually, some phishing scam. So, usually, what people do is they, send you onto a similar landing page or similar login, and you end up entering your credentials. So, this too is possible because we users or the users or the victims are not aware of some basic, very basic cyber security or cyber safety. I mean, just basic thing like just looking at the URL, making sure that this application or making sure going through the list of permission this application is requires or to run, or whether do I trust this site and all these things, right? This is possible because of the weakness of the victims. So the other thing is social engineered malware. This is also similar to phishing, but this what happens is in the forms of apps and games, hackers try to get the users to install them. We have a lot of smartphones and a lot of smart devices. Even nowadays you have smart features, smart TVs, your house is smart, but we actually, on the other hand, keep getting dumber. That's what happens, right? So when you don't know how smart your device is, or what your device is doing, or with whom your device is communicating, and when you don't have the knowledge about it, then you're going to be a victim of these kind of attacks. And the other thing is social engineering, right? See, a lot of people are tricked by emails, right? A person sends an email saying that even very prominent personalities have been actually scammed and also done as pranks as well. You end up you say that you're the CEO of the company and you send some email saying that you need to buy this much amount or make sure that you make this transaction done. Just try it out. But ultimately, a lot of people end up actually doing that. So this is one of the biggest cyber threats that is available right now. And I think day before yesterday, I read in the news where people have complained. A lot of more than 2,000 complaints have come to the Computer Emergency Response Team here, CERT or something. So saying that they have been getting calls from unknown numbers saying that your phone should have got a code, a verification code from Facebook or something. Can you please send it? I have actually mistyped my number or something like that. So people who don't know how these things work, right? They end up saying that okay, maybe it's some mistake and it's okay that I give this code. But what that person has done is actually registered your phone number in order to create an account. So these days, your phone number, your email address, your Facebook account is connected to your identity. You can no longer say that someone hacked it and something like that. You need it because it's connected to your identity, then and there. So these things are actually even in some cases produced as evidence, especially when it comes to mobile phones. So if your mobile phone is connected with some Facebook account or if your number, if a SIM that is registered to your identity is lying about somewhere, then you're in trouble, right? So actually I want to also tell you how some people get your ID card number registered with other SIMs that we have absolutely no idea about, right? So this especially happens in universities. So when people go to buy couple SIMs or these kind of things, what they do is when you give your ID card to get a photocopy, they have that ID and they so I think each person can register up to 5 SIMs of a certain network provider. So I think that's the limit. So what they do is they register 4 more SIMs or 3 more SIMs because they already might know, you have already a SIM, you might have already a SIM, then you have this new SIM. You have 3 extra SIMs that you can buy. So what this person does is they register your ID number for 3 other SIMs and they sell it to someone else. So this actually, they do it not out of malicious intent, but just to make things fast, because if they are able to, because registering SIMs and getting these couple SIMs, takes quite a bit of time period. So in order to have on-demand SIMs, what they do is they register at least 2 SIMs for your ID number. So each person, each customer, he gets another extra SIM registered to that person, and this SIM is being sold to someone else. Right? So ultimately, someone else is using a SIM that is registered under your name. Now this is a problem. A lot of people don't realize it, right? But if in some case, right? I mean, God forbid, in some case this SIM is in a crime scene or something, then you're done for. You can't say that I didn't know about it. So you need to make sure that. So actually, you need to go through. There's a way you can get all the SIMs that are registered under your name for each service provider. So you should go there. And actually, I think some time ago, even the TRC made this announcement asking people to make sure that you have your phone numbers registered to it and you know about all your phone numbers. So this was actually. These are things that happen in our day-to-day life, and a lot of people are victim to this, right? Because the main reason is we don't know how this happened or how people exploit these kind of things, right? So social engineering is one of the biggest threats when it comes to cyber attacks. So I'll just give you some examples of some recent hacks which have been used. So hacking multiple Facebook accounts. So this flaw actually lied in this 6-digit code that is used to reset your password. Right? A security researcher, I forgot his name, but you can, if you go to this link, you can check it out. That person, what he did was that. So how this 6-digit works is that. So when it comes to, if there are 6 digits, there are 1 million possibilities, right? 1 million combinations. Okay. So this, when you request when a person requests a password reset, that digit is generated, the 6 digits are generated, and if it wasn't used by that person, by the requester, it doesn't change, it will just remain there, right? So what this security researcher thought was that if you can put in a lot of reset requests, password reset requests within a short period of time, right? If you put 1 million requests, or rather 1,000,001 requests, most of the time the 1 millionth first person, or the latest person who put the request will have a code that was already generated, because that code wasn't changed, because it wasn't used, it remains there. So the next code that generates also is similar to this. So this person is actually able to demonstrate. So when he notified Facebook, they weren't able to. They just dismissed, saying that it's not possible. It's not going to. People can't request in such a such short time, and all these stories are there. But ultimately, what this person did was, he using the Graph API, he was able to get 2 million Facebook, the accounts of the IDs of 2 million users. He sent out requests, 2 million password sent requests, and just got a random 6-digit number and just ran a comparison. I mean, just kept on trying for all these 2 million accounts, and ultimately he was able to hack one. So it was a very simple thing. I mean, it's not obvious, but it's a very simple thing to do. Another similar attack, actually, we have the videos. I have added the link. You can just go and see, demonstrating it live, how this person is able to hack into a Facebook account. This was also this was possible because the beta version of Facebook didn't have a limit of the number of attempts you can use that 6-digit code. So usually, I think the production, the live version, I think it's limited to 3 times. So more than 3 times, that code is not valid. But in this beta version, it wasn't limited. So what this person did was got a password request and did a very simple brute force attack. So for discovering this bug, he actually was paid $15,000 or something. But the previous person has just paid $500. So, so actually there are things like, you call them bug bounties. Right? All these big, large internet companies organize these bug bounties, and they invite security researchers all around the world. And if you find a bug in their system, they actually pay you like huge amounts of money, $15,000, $100,000 amounting to that, depending on the vulnerability you're paying. So these actually to make sure that your system is perfect. And this is another thing that we need to note, is that when you take companies like Facebook and Google and all these, before they send out a product, it's thoroughly tested, right? I mean, these are like experts in their fields. It's thoroughly tested. But even after all this testing, and even after all these rigorous security procedures, you ultimately end up with simple things like this, simple hacks like this, right? So that is human nature. So here, what we need to, if you go through all these attacks that we have seen, including the Enigma machine, if I ask you what is the common thing that you see among these, what is the common aspect? We were able to, these hacks are possible because of our business, because the way we use it, right? Because the lack of common sense, when it comes to phishing and things like that. It's the lack of knowledge, one thing, and the lack of common sense. Even if you don't know, if you're kind of a skeptical person, and if you actually care about who is behind your information, who you are giving this information out to, you'll be a bit more cautious. So actually, since I'm running out of time, I'll just go through the list of the examples. There was also another Bitcoin user who was unmasked because he was using his real name. So that's also very, a silly mistake to do, right? I mean, this person is laundering, I think, more than $4 billion he had been able to launder in Bitcoin, but he ultimately made a very simple, trivial mistake of using his real name, and he was arrested. You can read about it in the news. I'm not exact, I can't remember his name, Alexei, some Russian person. And since he's considered a Bitcoin genius, I think US is trying to get him over there on some charges. So, and this is the phishing attack I spoke about. So actually, this what they did was, they registered an app in the Google app, among the Google apps called Google Doc, right? So the name of the app was Google Doc. And what they did was, they requested, they were, once a user accepts this link or accepts this app, it actually requires permission that it needs control over your contacts and all these things. What it does is, since you give permission readily, it will send out in your name to all these other contacts in your list, saying that, click on this link or, have this information, something like that. And they were able to kind of infect a lot of user accounts using this, right? It was a very simple thing. And in this case, the attack was a bit, it wasn't a typical phishing attack. Here actually the name was also Google Doc, right? So you kind of might tend to trust, you tend to trust this application more than others, So these kind of things are also a bit difficult, but you need to be aware of it. Then also you might have noted the Vault 7. So Vault 7 was a suite of tools that was used by CIA basically to actually kind of hack into stuff. So these were top secret, but some hackers were able to break into it and expose the tools. So these tools, basically going through these tools, hackers were able to actually know about the vulnerabilities that existed in these systems, which they can easily exploit. So WannaCry was the ransomware attack, I think about 3 or 4 months ago, was as a reason of this. And then recently, I think 2 or 3 days ago, they tried a smart device hack. So since now we have this concept of smart homes, where you have smart light bulbs and smart fridges and smartphones, and everything is smart about it. But if you have just one device which is compromised, then everything everything else becomes compromised as well. Because they were actually able to demonstrate it. So there's a small video showing how they were able to insert a compromise a light bulb, and they were able to take control of the entire house. So if you have gates and things, then again everything is compromised. So there are some other easy hacks and leaks that we are commonly a victim of. One of the things that when we give our devices to repairs, a lot of people end up leaking their private information. It's really unfortunate, and at some this leads to people committing suicide. This is a serious threat. Right? So the thing that you need to know is that just because you delete information from your hard disk or your memory, deleting doesn't mean that that information disappears. It's not like you take a piece of paper and write information and use an eraser to erase it. It doesn't work like that. When it comes to binary, it was just ones and zeros. There is no point in changing this information. So what it just does is, deleting means the device recognizes that this space which contains this information is writable now. You can write it, but it doesn't change that information. But you can of course access it directly. But you have readily available softwares where you can just read through all these memories and recreate whatever the links that were lost. So this is how a lot of people get their private information leaked down. So what you can do is, you can actually wipe your memories. So it's a very simple thing to do. What you do is you make sure that you get the remaining memory and you create a dummy file or a dump file to fill that space. So now the information is changed, and then you simply delete that file. So now the remaining information is the latest information that you created, which doesn't make any sense. So, or if you can't do that, you can, for that also you have a lot of softwares that can be easily used to wipe your devices. So you can use kind of those things. And another thing is using default usernames and passwords. A lot of people get hacked because of this. I know personally people who use these kind of things to hack into people's routers and use their internet connections, right? So ultimately, those people start complaining that I rarely use my internet, but I end up with no data about 1 or 2 weeks. But what happens is these kind of people, it's a very simple thing to do. They hack into your router and get your account information, and you use that connection, and you end up without data. So one of the main reasons for this, and even when it comes to hacking CCTV cameras, the main flaw in this is that you end up using the default username and password. You don't bother to change it. In a way, you actually deserve to be hacked, right? You deserve to be hacked if you can't do a simple thing like that, right? If you can't do a simple thing like changing the default username and password, come on, right? So I know some things apps, as I mentioned, you just give authority to people to use apps. If you know about Truecaller, I wanted to talk about Truecaller, but since there's no time, I'll just skip over. If you want to know more information about this, we can maybe talk about it later. So prevention, when it comes to, it's not big things. It's not rocket science. It's basic common sense, right? It's basic common sense, and you need to be aware of whom you share your information with. Are you actually willing to share your personal pictures or images or information with the internet? Basically, do you feel safe in your information being stored in the internet? You need to question this, right? Maybe it will be a bit inconvenient to share your information with your friends or whatever. But if you're really concerned about the security, you need to think about it as well. And also the other thing is that don't be intimidated. So say your information is compromised, it doesn't mean it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world, right? So we should never be intimidated. We should go to the authorities or do whatever and take the needful. But if you give in, then that's it. Because if you heard recently a game called the Blue Whale, what it does is that once you install the game, it takes control of your devices, and even before you can encrypt whatever the message you send, you have access to, because you have access to the voice, right? So all your personal information is with that person, and especially teenage children, they are easily threatened and intimidated. They threaten your parents and everything, and you end up just committing suicide, just like that. So these kind of things are very real threats. So those are and the other thing is like you can update your software, have basic antivirus protection. But mostly if you just analyze these attacks that I have explained and shared with you, it's because of the lack of common sense and common, very basic safety practices, like changing your password daily or not sharing information. These are things that our parents have been even telling before the cyber age is like that now. Right? Basically, it's that. And also, I wanted to end this presentation with a quote from actually a fairy tale. Obviously, most of you guys might have read it. Does anyone remember a quote called, "If you don't know where it keeps its head, don't talk to it," or something similar to it? Exactly. Right? So it actually applies to this age more than that. If you don't know whom you are sharing your information, don't do it. Make sure that you know exactly how these things are working. So that's the end of my presentation. So if you guys have any questions. Okay. So there's a question regarding the spelling. Okay. Exactly. So anyway, thank you very much. Sorry for taking more time but of course there was some points that I missed. Maybe leading a lightning talk or something can help this as well. So thank you very much.